think this is the first story I've heard from you like this either.
Yeah.
You've got a bunch of them.
I talk about cops. The best one was I was going with she would be my wife one day, but she wasn't at the time. She was still married to somebody else, and they were going to a custody battle for their kid, right? So I'm going to court with her, and we're going to court for custody, right? For custody. And he's saying that we're drug addicts and buying pot kid, which is true. And so we're going in, and we're going into Newark, and you're going through the Newark courthouse, through the magnometer, through the airport thing, right? And the cop is there, and I go and I have this portfolio. It's a hemp portfolio. It's made out of hemp and stuff. So he goes, okay, good. So he's searching everything. So I put it down, and I went like this, and as I opened it up, there was a bag of pot right there, and maybe 2 joints worth of pot in it. But it was right there, like you're the cop. The cop's right here. Boom! I'm like, I'm feeling this. Whoa! And I looked down and I saw it, and he looked down and he saw it, and he looked up, and this is like a Newark cop who's in charge of like the courthouse security. This is he can kill you if he feels like nothing will happen. And he looks at me and he goes, and in that little wry look and a little shake of the head, I noticed he wasn't thinking to himself, I'm going to throw you in jail and throw the key away. He was thinking to himself, you're the stupidest motherfucker I ever saw in my whole fucking life. He was feeling very superior to me. He should at that moment. And I went like this, and I went, I'll be right back. And I grabbed it, and I walked over to the garbage can, and I went like this, and I came back, and he said, you're very lucky. I said, yes, sir, I'm very, very, very lucky. Because if that happened, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. He just let me in. And I was going in for my fiance's child support. He's showing the cop I have weed that was the end of our case, right there. That was it. It's over. By the way, Your Honor, they're not here because we arrested them while they were coming into court with weed. For coming into your court with weed. We arrested them downstairs because they showed the weed to the police. Slam, you get the kid. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Cusick.
Yeah, Rick is. Yeah. That's cool. I've done this before. I'll tell you a bunch of stories, entertain you. This guy started this thing that is now not going to take over this thing.
Yeah.
There's plenty of books you could read. I'd recommend the book Marijuana is Safer. So
that's a good book, yeah.
It's an excellent book. And that pretty much touches everything.
That's how Safer is the organization that he wrote that book. Paul wrote that book.
Yeah.
That's how they legalized in Colorado. They didn't sit around and say, oh, it's bad, it should be, it's my rights, that kind of thing. Which all of those are really good arguments. That's not what they said, though. What they said was, it's safer than alcohol.
Right. Yeah.
And if we're going to do something here as a society, let's promote this over alcohol because you'll have less people dying. And it's just so funny. They were legalized it in Washington State recently, right? And there was this vicious fight in Washington State about stoned drivers, DUI, driving under the influence. Oh my God! What's going to happen now that we've legalized? Everybody's going to be driving stoned.
The kids will drive stoned.
What did I say? I said Delaney.
Delaney.
Yeah, it's an ex-wife. So they've had it for 6 months, and there's no uptick in DUI, and they're at a loss. Well, how come? Well, I hate to say it because it's not really a good thing for us to say, but they were driving stoned before, dude. It wasn't like, oh, you legalized it, and everybody went out, woo, I can go smoke weed now, whoa, get behind the wheel. It didn't happen like that, not once, not one person. That didn't happen to one person. They were everybody who wanted to smoke weed beforehand, smoked it, they just didn't tell anybody. And they drove, they just didn't tell anybody. They were driving all over the place for the last 20 years, and nothing's going to change.
Well, they drive slower too.
Yeah, that's the other.
Or not.
They're more careful.
Or not.
Because I'm in the car with my son going down to D.C. and he's driving like 55. I'm like, man, it's picked up, man.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Dad, okay. And all of a sudden I realized he's fucking stoned.
Well, sometimes I have this, when I do my college lecture, I have this thing where I ask people to raise their hand. I say, so you're looking at like 100 college students. And I said, who here likes to drive fast? And everybody puts their hands up. I said, yeah, right here. Driving fast is fun, right? Cool. I said, okay, now who here likes to drive stoned? 60% hold their hand up, all guys. Right? And I said, okay, cool, now put your hands down. Okay, who thinks you drive better stoned? 50%. I said, yeah, you all think you do. You don't. I said, because some of you drive faster when you're stoned, some of you drive slower when you're stoned. But the reason why you think you drive better stoned is because you grew up with video games. And it's just like a video game. That windshield is just like a video game. Wow, you're threading the needle and you're running this. Right? But with a video game, you get reset.
Right.
And then I take out my teeth and I tell the story about how I got stoned and I got in a car accident and I lost my teeth. I really get their attention. But my point being is that they're always going to come up with these things. But legalization isn't going to be a big change in our culture. It's a big change in theirs.
Right.
True.
Yeah, it's a big change in theirs now. That's what medicalization did. Medicalization made dispensaries and compassion centers and stuff, put them on the corner, and the world didn't end. And everybody started to go, oh, well, maybe it's not a bad idea. I thought the world was going to end. It didn't end.
Oh yeah, it was so funny. One of the ladies that I worked with, when they put one of the dispensaries in New Jersey, you heard the story. It was kind of recently. It's interesting how she did this too. She's middle-aged, maybe like about 50-ish. Really nice lady, pretty cool and everything. But she's somewhat conservative. Kind of goes with the status quo and kind of swallows some of the BS and the rhetoric. And she said, "Well, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. What are they going to be doing at the dispensaries? Are they actually going to be smoking? Why don't they just take that? Isn't there a pill for that? Marinol? Why don't they just take that? And I was like,
Wow.
And I didn't jump in because that's my problem is I hate confrontation. It's easy when they're all like-minded. It's a little harder when you have to fight.
Yeah.
So but I thought it was interesting because it was almost like she was saying that because she honestly saw that it was segueing and that it was going in that direction, and it was almost like her mind was saying, well, I don't know this that well. What's going on here? Testing other people's reaction. It was really interesting.
They're losing ground.
thing.
What's the number one recreational drug in the world?
Yeah, caffeine.
Caffeine.
Yeah,
And by the way, think about how many delivery systems it has. It comes in soda, it comes in chocolate, it comes in tea, it comes in coffee. And that's just the top 4.
Yeah.
There's probably another 20 things I'm not even thinking of, Yeah, so that's why it's the number one. Here's the number, worldwide, the 5 most popular recreational drugs, right? Nobody gets it right, right? Caffeine is number 1.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Tobacco is number 2. Okay. Alcohol is number 3. Marijuana is number 5. Nobody gets number 4. Nobody. And that's because it's an Asian recreational drug. And it's used here, but it's used recreationally in Asia. That's Viagra. This is like a big deal, what's happening now in Colorado, what's happening. It's going to turn. This is like, there's an uphill thing. This is the hill. And it's about to go like this. And it's still not going to be fast. Believe me, there's going to be blowback, and it's going to be another 4 or 5 years before anything happens for real, like the government or anything like that. I don't think it's going to be Obama. I don't think it's going to be Obama. I don't think it's going to be Obama as long as Joe Biden's vice president. Joe Biden's a vicious anti-drug warrior, and he's not going to change. And so he's got the president's ear, and so that's just my opinion. But right now, that doesn't mean anything because the march of history is going where it's going. It's 53% want full legalization. We were talking before. about people who don't smoke. You know, the woman who said, "Oh, it's drugs, it's drugs." Yeah,
I mean, she might, you know, I don't really
I
know.
always quote the use figures to impress people. 28 million smoke it every year, and 17 million smoke it every month, and 5 million smoke it every day. And those are real figures, and those are, but the real figure, if you really want to talk about legalization, the real figure is 100 million people in the United States have smoked it at least once. 100 million people smoke. There's only 300 million people in the whole United States, man, woman, and child. That means
Take
that
out the children.
every street you walk down on average, 1 out of 3 people. Every street in this country you walk down the street, 1 out of 3, on average, has smoked marijuana. Probably more in this room, but but 1 out of 3, certainly anywhere on average. And the thing is that that's how you're going to get legalization. It's not going to happen with people who smoke weed. It's going to happen with people who used to smoke.
Who've experienced.
Who know that it's not a horrible thing.
Right, all the
Most people
propaganda
who stop, that means
stuff.
70 million, if there's 28 million people that smoke it every year and 100 million who smoked it forever, that means there's 73 million people who used to smoke weed and don't. Let's say a couple of million says, oh, I was addicted, oh, it led to hard drugs, oh, maybe 5, 10 million. I'll give it to you, you know? That means we still got 60 million people who have had a benign experience with weed. They've had maybe even a positive experience with weed. They just got different priorities now.
Right, exactly.
They have kids,
Yeah.
they have a mortgage, they have a
That's kind of what
job.
I meant by that.
That's
Sure,
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happens. And so, and it becomes another thing too, is that those people, this is not their key issue, nor
Right.
should it be. And, you know, they're not stakeholders. They're one of the great, you know, I made this speech, we were talking in Philadelphia the other day, at a Philadelphia Normal Conference. And they're talking about getting more women in the movement, all the time. They want more women in the movement, they want more blacks in the movement. And I'm for that, you know. But I said, every time it comes up, I said, you got to understand something now. There's of the 28 million people that smoke marijuana at least once a year, these are government figures, they're probably wrong, but it gives us a place to start, right? 28 million smoke it every year, 27, something like that, every year, 50-50. It's 50.2, 49.8, male, female, right? Then you get to the 17 million. 17 million is like 60-40, 65-35, you know, all in favor, right? When you get to daily marijuana smokers, of which there's maybe some 3.5 to 5 million daily marijuana smokers, 80-20 male, 80-20 male. Why is that? Well, because it's a youthful pursuit. Most of these people are young. And when you're young, I certainly was interested in learning how to be a man, how to assert my outlaw bona fides. And marijuana is the easiest thing in the world to grow, sell, be the cool, you know. The person who smokes every day is invested in this subject. The person who smokes once a year couldn't care less about this subject. You know, so appealing to them, but kids drop. Let's say, oh, there's 27 million marijuana smokers. We get them all to vote. You're not going to get them to vote. But what you might get is, I bet you it wouldn't be easier to get people who used to smoke to vote for marijuana legalization than the people that smoke once a year. Because the people that smoke once a year are trying to hide something. Mm-hmm. The other ones are sitting there going, you know, I used to smoke that. There's nothing wrong with that. You know.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what you got to do. We got to address, and that's what NORML should do ultimately, is address people who don't smoke marijuana, normalize it. That's what we want to do. And, you know, this is a really important moment. What we're doing right here, like I said, this is really, we'll get something in New Jersey. We got medical. Who would have believed it? You know, who would have fucking believed we got medical? I've been doing it 20 years. They said, you live in Jersey, you're going to get medical. No, I'm not. I'm not in a million years. Okay, I'm not surprised by which way it went after we got the medical.
We still might not get
I
it.
sort of feel justified. We got it, we didn't. So I'm walking, this is a true story. I'm walking down the street. I'm going through a divorce, right? I just want to tell them we were going through a divorce. And I happen to be in my suit and tie. I'm never in a suit and tie. And I happen to be in a suit and tie coming out of the courthouse in Newark. And I'm walking out of my hearing. And there's this camera on the street. And I walk by and they say, excuse me, there's a gubernatorial race going on. Would you care to ask the governors, the candidates a question? I said, no. I kept walking. Wait. And I walked back. I said, let me get this right. You got a governor's, this is going to go, he goes, yeah, this is going to be on the debate. If you ask a good question, we'll put it on the debate. And I said, all right, turn on your camera. And I said, hi, my name's Cusick. I live in Montclair, and there is a medical marijuana bill before the state legislature, and I'd like to ask each of the candidates how they vote. And to nobody's shock, Corzine said yes. The guy in the middle, I forget his name, he said, I'd make sure we'd have to do some, make sure I'd be assured of some things, but yes, And then to everyone's shock, Christie said, well, you know, I don't want people to be like California where you can get marijuana for a headache, but I don't want to get in the way of sick people having medicine. The devil will be in the details, but I will sign that bill. What he didn't say was he was going to be the devil. He was going to come and provide the details. You know? But he said that to me, so I take it personally. that he said that, you know. I mean, I lucked out. I'm walking down the street, and the next thing you know, it was like on the front page of the Star-Ledger, Christie said he was going to go. I said, "Wow, man! The one time I had a fucking suit and tie on in my whole life, ever." Yeah, it's like God going here. But yeah, he's going to get in the way. This is so important now. What they do, we got this. People like Jazz and Evan and guys like that, you're going to push through. I'd say a decrim. Decrim. In 2007, we do Boston Freedom Rally every year. In 2007, it was a little rainy, and I set up a booth. Right? Maybe it was like 10,000 people there that day. I'd been coming every year. And Keith Stropp, who founded Normal, said, "You want to smoke a joint before I get started?" I said, "Sure." So we went behind the thing, but smoking a joint. And this kid came up to us, and I figured he wanted to hit in the joint. Put his hand on my shoulder, he said, "You're under arrest." I said, "What?" And he was literally half our age. And he was an undercover cop, and he arrested me and Keith for smoking a joint. This is 2007 in Boston. They arrested at the Freedom Rally that day 60 people. We were among the first two. They arrest 60 people every year at the Boston Freedom Rally because there's a quota every year.
The quota is 60?
The quota was 60, yeah. And so they pulled us in, and they had a command station, and they arraigned us right there. So we go in. So me and Keith, I have gray hair and shit, and everybody else is young, and everybody else is in handcuffs and everything, all 20-year-old kids and shit, right? And they said, "Okay, stand here on the dotted lines. Stand here. Step up to the table." I stepped up to the table. I said, "What's your name?" I told my name, where do you live? I told him, "What do you do for a living?" I said, at the time I was the editor. I said, "I'm the editor of High Times Magazine." And he looked at me and goes, "You're kidding." And I said, "Oh no, it gets better." I turned around and I slapped Keith on the, I said, "And this is Keith Stropp, founder of the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, and he's an attorney, and everything we're saying is on the record." And he said, "You're going to write about this?" I said, "Oh yeah." And I'm thinking to myself, I've been waiting to get busted for 38 years. And I finally get busted. I get busted at the Boston Freedom Rally, smoking a joint with Keith Stropp, the guy who started Normal. So anyway, we gave this cop hell for the next 2 hours. We just, there was no fear. It was a third of a joint. Long story short, we took it all the way to the Supreme Court of Massachusetts. We refused to hear it. And Harvard Law School backed us for free, went all the way up to a third of a joint. It was 2 years of my life, an amazing fucking experience. In that 2 years, they decriminalized marijuana in Massachusetts. In that 2 years, they would hold the Boston Freedom Rally every year. That year we did it, 2007, maybe 10,000 people showed up every year. They decriminalized in 2009. Started picking up 8,000, 10,000. This last September, I was in Seattle, but they had me get on the phone and do the countdown in 420 in Boston from Seattle, and I addressed 25,000 people who at 10 10-9-8-7-6-5-4-3-2-1, smoked on command. 25, in the same spot I got busted at 4 years ago for smoking a joint. That's the difference between decriminalization and not having decriminalization. I used to be against decriminalization. I was like, oh, let's go for the whole thing, fuck this, you know. We'll never get legalization if we get decriminalization. But practically speaking, you know, it makes all the difference. And it makes, and I mean, the first year that they decriminalized in Massachusetts, everybody showed up at the Boston Freedom Rally and smoked a joint and held up a $100 bill. It's a $100 fine. It's not everybody $100 bill. Boston cops go, okay. I do that, yeah. Okay, you can do that. Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, we might get it here, but you guys, I mean, don't look at this and think that this is lame, because it's not. I mean, we're nowhere on a fucking rainy night. And you guys came 2.5 hours, 3 hours?
Whatever, it's not that long. It's 4
Probably it's
hours.
not getting anybody busted, because people will show up. It's going to be a kid culture.
Yeah.
And kid culture will show up.
Very easily.
I mean, that's what happened the other day in Philadelphia. They had to factionalize. They had to go, we did a
The
nice...
Liberty Bell?
Yeah, Liberty Bell is where they smoked weed.
Yeah.
Everybody smoked weed, and they were led by Weed Man, you know? And then we were on the other side of town, and we were at the University of Pennsylvania doing a seminar. And not that, don't get me wrong, I'm all for, obviously I'm all for civil disobedience, but I just didn't see any reason.
There'd be a purpose to it, yeah.
No purpose to it there, and then just, and Weed Man is nuts. And, you know, I mean, I don't look like Robert Redford, but he acts crazy than
Is everybody here familiar with NJ Weedman?
Yeah, I know.
Weed Man.
You know who he is. Remember the guy?
You don't know who he is?
Black guy
Yeah.
with the thread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, this guy, he's a
What's
resident
that
of both California and New Jersey. He's a Rasta, so he uses cannabis religiously. He has his medical card in California, but he's a resident of New Jersey. He was arrested here with like something like 5 pounds. in his
Several
trunk.
times, I believe.
A whole bunch of times, and he's been arrested at the Liberty Bell for smoking. And he's really, his MO is that it's my civil liberty, and I'll do it wherever I want. And you know, and it's great that he calls all that attention to himself and to our cause. But Normal, as an organization, prefers to use civil disobedience only if it's going to be a purposeful act that illustrates an injustice. Just going and getting high at the park is something different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that
although I can
Russell
admire his
5 pounds,
tenacity.
how's he still?
you know what? He was actually
searched.
searched illegally. They were supposed to have a warrant, so.
Yeah, he announced
Too
it.
bad.
He announced it.
And I think he nullified the jury too, didn't he?
Yeah,
He
he
didn't?
announced
He
he
did.
notified the jury.
Okay, but that's not what happened.
Huh?
It's from
You
the
told
search.
them about their right of jury nullification.
He didn't do that.
Notification.
He said he did, but that's not what happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that
I thought I
there was
saw
not.
it.
The jury did not nullify his thing. That's not
Well,
what
you
happened.
No, you got
it's not
probation.
legally allowed to.
You got probation or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. If he nullified,
If he notified, we have nothing.
there'd be nothing, right? Exactly.
He didn't nullify it.
Yeah.
He tried to get
He
it
tried to get
nullified.
it nullified. Here's
He
what
tried
happened.
to.
He
Distribution.
tried to get nullified
He
and he
copped out
didn't get
until
arrested.
probation.
He could have got arrested for saying it,
Yeah.
and so he said it, and because he didn't have an attorney, they let it go. So he said, he successfully told the jury, you can nullify.
Yeah.
They didn't do that, but he successfully, and then he announced that he did it. Because I was real excited.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah, so was I.
because that was the reason we took, when we did the thing in Boston, we went all the way to the Supreme Court on a nullification.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we thought we were going to get it, and then we didn't, and they dismissed it. And so when he got it, I said, wow, that crazy motherfucker, he's crazy. Look at that, he's the one that got it. You know, God protects fools and drunkards, man. Like there he is, you know. And then I looked at it, and he said he got it. He said, and he did get further than we got,
Yeah.
which is that.
He was at least able to tell the jury.
Yeah, and the
you
reason
have
why he
this
got away
option.
with it is because he didn't have a lawyer.
Yeah,
He
and
was
that's
his own
why he
lawyer,
was
so
able
they
to do
let
it,
it- so
because
the
he had a
judge
lawyer
decided not
saying
to
you're not
throw him in
allowed to do
jail.
that.
Yeah, you're not supposed. But if there was a lawyer that did
He
that,
represented himself
yeah,
with
Yeah,
the
he
hounds and their lives.
yeah. Well, he's out.
And so he successfily argued an illegal search. Was that how it happened?
No, he did. Then later on, he got help.
Oh, he did get a
got
lawyer
help.
eventually.
As a matter of fact, I think he. I'm not sure about this. I think he was in pro se, but he had lawyers.
Uh,
Okay.
He did.
You know, not saying that
We
they're,
did.
yeah.
Well, whenever you have
But
something,
he
you
was
have to
pro
have
se.
a lawyer sit next to
He
you.
was pro se, huh?
Yeah, I think you have to have a lawyer sit next to you. when you're
Record
there.
the points
Yeah,
at some
record the
point. The thing is, I respect the guy, and I really do, and I'm glad he does this sort of thing. But from my perspective, there's a handful of individuals in this culture, in this movement, that I call them the Marijuana Martyrs Club, and they personally decided that the law is unfair, and I'm going to show how unfair it is by having heaped down upon my head as hard as I, and draw attention to myself while they do it. And you get Montgomery, and you get Jordan, and I don't doubt their sincerity. I just don't, it seems like
Them being in jail isn't gonna do us
it
any
doesn't
good.
help,
And-
and it's about ego and
Right, yeah,
about,
it's like masochism.
And that's why Normal doesn't support it either, because we
Right.
don't wanna push that kind of ideology onto anyone else, because then you're going to jail for what? You know, like the whole point is that this ruins people's lives. We don't want your life to get worse
Yeah.
by fighting for what's right.
I have a joke. I say there's at least 10 people I know, and they believe that on the day that marijuana is legalized, they will erect a statue to the man who's most responsible for that. And I know at least 10 people who believe that statue should be them.
I was there when they picked the jury for Weed Man. I was actually there.
Oh, yeah?
So the prosecutor, Luciano, says to Ed, says, how you doing today, Ed? This is before the judge came in the room. How you doing today, Ed? Ed goes, I'm pretty fucking high. And the prosecutor says, you don't have to tell me all that. And I said, I never used marijuana in my life. I've never taken a drug in my life. And Ed goes, that's because you're a tight ass.
No kidding, really?
Wow. He was going to roll a joint on the table right there.
Yeah,
He was eating cookies, pot cookies. He don't care. He don't care.
I think there's a place for people like that.
Yeah,
I'm saying
that's
that
important.
I think he serves a purpose.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, he
That
serves
shock
a
value
purpose.
Yeah,
right up in your face
and-
and forces you to say,
Yeah, and
where to listen.
you can't really,
But,
again, I
I
can't
understand.
say anything against it, but practically speaking, as a person who deals with strategy
Yeah,
for this
yeah.
movement, strategically it doesn't
Right.
really
Yeah,
help a
strategic,
whole
yeah.
lot. The movement actually was started by a guy, Eggermeyer, who was in 1964 and walked in the San Francisco station, lit a joint up, and the police station blew it in the cop's face and said arrest him. And that's how we started. That's exactly how we started the first time I've ever civil
What
disobedience.
could Ed Fortune have done at the Liberty Bell to make it more positive, more,
Well, the thing is, it was about civil disobedience at the Liberty Bell. Nobody got arrested.
no.
Good, It didn't have to go like that. They could have got arrested.
Could there have been a purpose to it? I mean, is there something that you would have done differently, or if you were there?
I just don't know that at this point in the game, when we're winning, somebody said to me, somebody asked me the question that day on the panel, because we were on the other side of the city. And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I think 10 years ago, a place for civil disobedience was much more strong. The case for civil disobedience, I think it's much less strong now, because we got 52% of the country on our side, because we need to get people who do not smoke marijuana to see us as reasonable citizens who are just asking a reasonable thing. When you talk about the 5 million people that smoke pot every day, them's my people, and I'm one of them, and I'm as a whack job as they are, okay? You don't want to live my life, I guarantee it, okay? I'm really out there, I'm really counterculture, edge kind of person. I don't expect anybody to be there with me, by nature. That's just me, and I don't expect people to listen. I'm constantly amazed when they ask me to come back on to do things, because I know that I fall into you look at me and it's like, you're a pothead.
You and I are a really odd couple.
That's what I'm saying.
'cause I
He
come-
gives me credibility. I stand next to him. I
He
say,
gives
I'm
me
not really
credibility.
stupid as I look.
I come from the exact opposite perspective, though, but you're absolutely right. When it comes to the civil disobedience, I've really studied a lot of that. The whole point of it is to illustrate an injustice.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the
We
point
got
where
it.
the majority of people understand that it's an injustice, and then you have these people going and smoking pot in public, what you have is a whole lot of people being intoxicated and disorderly in public, and then you're getting the exact opposite effect out of the disobedience that you want.
I don't think I never think of it as a negative. Like I said, I don't want to sit here and say it's doing something wrong by doing that. I just don't think it's effective. I think it can be it can hit people the wrong way.
Yeah.
I think that this is the politics of incrementalism. That's what we are doing. We are working the politics of incrementalism. Doing a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there.
Medical, decrim.
It's only effective.
That's right.
This is the answer right here. This is the answer.
Oh, you got that right. That was
But then
the
again-
game changer.
Yeah.
That was the game changer. And by the way, that's the game changer for any social movement.
Yeah.
No matter what it is you do. For
Well,
breast cancer.
I'm here because of YouTube, man. You know what I mean? Just going on YouTube.
Exactly.
Is that right? Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, right.
Cannabinol, CBD. So there's THC and CBD. Those are the main ones. The THC, of course, gets you high, but CBD is responsible for a lot of the medical
It's all
purposes.
synergistic. It's
Yeah.
not-
But it is
yeah,
synergistic.
One thing doesn't do.
Yeah,
And it's too complex for us to figure out
Yeah.
how to make it, so that's why you can't
It's
get.
just doing the real thing.
Right.
I mean, really,
Right.
why make your pill
You
next?
can't patent it. That's why the drug companies.
Exactly.
Well, they're about
Can't
to.
patent
Oddly enough, there are patents
They're about
pending.
to.
And
They
yeah,
just
they're
did.
working on it.
No, they didn't.
I'm gonna
It's
patent
coming.
the
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's coming. It's called
They-
Sativex, and it's going to come in the next year or so. And inside of that, what's going to happen?
Is that from Cannabis Therapeutics? Is that?
No, it's from GW Pharmaceuticals in England. It's basically pot squeezed down into it works just like marijuana. It's made from skunk number 1, which is one of the first thing to win the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam. They also patented
But it's not a
delivery
synthetic,
system.
it's a refined product.
It's a refined product,
Okay.
yeah, and they made a patented system so you can control the dosage, which is always the thing about it, right?
Right.
So it's been used for years in England and Spain and Canada, a few other places. They're trying to get it here. They're going to get it here. Now, I'll give you a little backstory. They've been trying to get it here for a few years. They hired the third drug czar, the number 3 drug czar under George Bush to be the person to push it through, the FDA and stuff. Now, why would you hire a drug warrior, right, Dr. Andrea Barthwell, to promote this? Well, she said, and I quote, marijuana, whole smoked marijuana is like a raging forest fire out of control. Sativex is the fire in your hearth, in your home, by which you warm your feet. And now that was 2007 or so, when George Bush was still in. She had left the Bush administration. Obama comes in, and we all went, hallelujah, Obama's in. Obama did not change. At first he said, I'm going to keep the DEA head, Michelle Lionheart, temporarily. Then 2 years into his administration, in October 2010, he said, I'm appointing Michelle Lionheart the head of the DEA permanent, which is to say, George Bush's
Yeah, no change.
DEA head is now permanently Obama's DEA head. The next month, November 2010, they put a white paper out, the DEA put a white paper position out on marijuana, and for the very first time, prior to that, any DEA or government or White House report, we would say, marijuana has no known medical efficacy. They changed that to smoked marijuana has no known medical efficacy. Sativex is coming, and when it comes, they're going to turn around and say, you know something? You're right about that medical marijuana thing. We do have a medical marijuana. It's called Sativex. It's made by GW Pharmaceuticals. It's distributed by Bayer. You can get it from any doctor in the world, not just those crazy medical marijuana doctors, but any doctor in the world, and it's paid for by your insurance. So you don't have to go and pay $90 for a gram, for an eighth of weed or a quarter of weed over at the weed store. So at that point, there's about, the great secret of California is that everybody's a patient. All use is medical use. But in reality, the people who have severe conditions in this country that medical marijuana is necessary for, right? Like your daughter, not somebody who is smoking,
Right, yeah.
but somebody who needs it.
Yeah.
There's probably about 750. There's a YouTube video of his daughter snorting lines of cocaine. Fucking thing. Now, We see how well that worked, huh, Joe?
Yeah.
How about, here's a thought, how about you tell me the fucking truth? Just a thought. You know? It might be going to be
Well, you know, to me, that's just ignorance, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I wrote this whole thing about Joe Biden because his family comes from the same little town in Pennsylvania my family comes from, and Irish American, I'm Irish American. We're from the same spot, we're from the same place. I get Joe Biden, but the problem is he never left the church. He's so guilty. He's so guilty.
That's
He's
so
so, you know, and that doesn't. There's nothing wrong with being in the church, but I'm saying he's got that kind of Catholic thing where he's going to go over and change the world because no, dude,
Yeah, it seems like he'd understand. I mean, we know how the Irish are with their whiskey, you know what I mean, and their beer. And look what Prohibition did. Nothing.
Right.
They created a criminal class.
Well, you know, in the Irish, you know, everybody's a drunk, so
they don't-
so getting you know, in the Irish families, there's always a tradition of, my
Right.
uncle's a drunk, and so we got to take care of him. We got to get him help. We got to get him off the bottle. How many times did I hear that when I was a little kid? We're getting him off the bottle. So when you talk about drugs with an Irishman, when you talk about that, they talk about rehabilitation. They talk about that. They go, March, go talk to the priest. Why don't you get, you know, all that kind of stuff. And Biden's he was responsible for 3 strikes you're out. He was responsible for the equivalency laws for equating, you know, ecstasy with heroin and stuff like that. He was responsible for the cocaine disparity, the cocaine disparity that we did. And there was a disparity, it was like crack cocaine, you can go to jail for 7 years. And the same amount of powdered cocaine, you go to jail for 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, and crack was a poor man's drug, and powdered cocaine was a white man's drug. So all these people were going to drive, you know, heavy thing. Well, he did all that, and then he turned around like a good Catholic and said, "Mea culpa, I'm sorry, please forgive me," and then he introduced the legislation in 2007, 2006 that got rid of his original stuff. So it's very, you have to see it in terms of being a failed Catholic. But yeah, Biden's the problem. Nobody thinks he is, but he is. He's the guy that I could see him sitting I could just see him every time the subject of pot comes up. He's sitting in the Oval Office and he turns and he can call the president by his first name. You know, he's not doing it. Don't do it. Oh, it's poison.
Right, it's hard.
Yeah, see it.
See it. It's coming out. I mean, look what's
Play
happening.
the kick part.
Huh?
The kid.
The kids, you got
That's the
daughters.
thing, is the kids love it too.
Yeah, I know.
I never say this on YouTube, but when Barack Obama's daughters went and talked to him about gay marriage, and he
Right,
turned
right.
around and somebody should turn that kid on the weed.
Exactly.
Right now, somebody. Dad, listen, I want to tell you something. And when Keith was starting normal, Carter was in. Carter was for marijuana law reform, and Keith was invited to the White House and did a lot of stuff. And Willie Nelson went to the White House, and Chip Carter said, "We smoked weed, we smoked weed, and like that." He said, "I understand you smoke marijuana." I said, "Yes, I do." He goes, "You want to see where I smoke it?" And he said, "Sure." And he took him up into the residence, opened the window, and they went out together onto the roof. And on July 4th, 1976, 200th anniversary, Chip Carter and Willie Nelson went on top of the roof and smoked a joint. And on top of the roof. That's badass.
The Abe Lincoln
That's
quote, right?
badass.
There's an Abe Lincoln quote where he's quoted as saying, you know, one of my favorite pastimes is to sit out on my back deck
Play
and
the
smoke
harmonica.
my... Right. Play
Yeah,
the
That's not
harmonica.
true, though.
I-
That's
Is it
not
not? Yeah, I
No.
just
You know where,
recently...
you know where it
Some of
came
that
from?
with Thomas Jefferson or
Now, you know
Oh,
where
is that
that,
it?
you know where that came from? That harmonica. You know where that came from? The Hohner harmonica.
Ah,
They wrote it in like 1890. They wrote it and said the Hohner harmonica.
Ah,
So
that-
they
that
wrote,
makes
"Yeah,
sense,
I like
right,
better.
right.
Play my harmonica. Yeah. But yeah, Jefferson, he grew him. He didn't. It wasn't true.
right, yeah.
well, I heard like because he kept like botany.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Sure, no, it's-
Oh, he separated the seeds. And how could he do that? Yeah, it's all.
They didn't like separate the males and females.
They were just doing stuff. He did not smoke. there was no white tradition of smoking marijuana in period in colonial, it just didn't happen.
Interesting.
just happened.
because-
Just had, there's no
Right.
tradition, there was no tradition of
Yeah.
smoking marijuana until the
What
Mexicans
about the
and
Right.
the
Indians?
Jamaicans, I'm sorry, the Mexicans and the United Fruit Company brought it from the Caribbean. No,
Right.
What about the Indians? Any,
American Indians,
Uh,
they didn't have it.
Peyote.
yeah,
No.
they,
Yeah, that is,
Not
right,
tobacco.
right, because
Tobacco.
I,
Most people don't understand,
Yeah.
tobacco, when American Indians smoked tobacco, they didn't smoke in a nice little pipe or something like that. They put a big pile here, they took a rug, they put it over their
Right,
head,
right, right.
they burned the rug and they inhaled until they vomited. That was smoking tobacco. And by the way, this was not the
It's fun.
chintzy ass little orange tobacco we have now. It's big, thick leather tobacco. It's big gray smoke going up in your nostrils. Yeah. And they come out of it, you'd be all red eyed and shit. No, they did it to get high. And that's for real. And then they get to the Europeans, and the Europeans made it into nice little pipes and all that stuff. But yeah, that's the whole smoking thing. I mean, what's the very first thing Columbus? Most people understand. The very first thing that Columbus saw when he came, when he got on the boat, right? And he's in the Pinton somewhere over there. He gets on the little longboat, and him and his boys come in, and the Indians come up with the very first thing he saw. They handed him tobacco, big thing of tobacco. They handed. Now, you got to take a what's that called? You take a macro view of that, right? That's not the word I'm looking for.
Macro's a big.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
there's another word. It's not
50,000 foot view?
You know, you got to look at the 6,000-foot, 6,000 year view. We were giving him disease. They were giving him disease, and they were going to wipe out that was the beginning of the end of the Indians, right there, right? The Indians were giving them tobacco, and that was the beginning of the end of you. It would just take a little longer. But okay, you were going to wipe out us. We're going to knock out 500,000 of you a month for the next 500 years.
tip for tip.
Yeah. But it's true, that would have to be in the history of psychotropic use. But in marijuana, there was no. I looked. I really.
yeah, not to Mexicans
really
going.
hard.
Yeah, because I was wondering about that, because like we were talking about, I guess it was Jefferson, or I would hear people say throwbacks to, I'm hearing the presidents were smoking, which we knew, of course, that the hemp industry was extremely important, but I also knew, I was always taught or always heard that, what happened was after or right before the Depression or whatever it was, they wanted to get the Mexicans out, because they were taking the jobs and they needed the Americans to have the jobs. So one of the tools to do that was to, stress that this cannabis that they smoked, from the Mexican front was this, horrible substance, so they could get them out, so they could arrest them on that and,
Racism in general.
Yeah, of course.
They didn't like black music.
Right,
they
black
didn't like
women
black and
raping,
brown,
or black men raping white
Yeah.
women, of course, that whole thing. But it just didn't, in my mind, it wasn't jiving how, if there was a culture of colonial whites smoking marijuana, how that could translate
but there's
into those same whites,
There's actually,
kicking out Mexicans because of it.
Yeah, even though there isn't that though, white people had a huge experience with hemp.
Right.
But when marijuana, which is a Spanish word, came
yeah.
up from Mexico,
Right.
then this was a new drug, a scourge. So,
Right. That makes more sense.
and the propaganda was furthered by William Randolph Hearst, who was
Exactly.
That's what you're getting
Yep.
at from.
Yeah.
He hated Mexicans.
Yeah, I'm reading more.
because the Mexicans took like
Yeah,
2 million
yeah,
acres of
yeah.
timberland from
And,
him.
Right.
And
But
he
it was
was
true,
a
you had to-
paper guy, so by getting rid of marijuana, he gets rid of the Mexican army that took the 2 million acres from him at the Alamo,
And the
and
competition.
also gets rid of them and the competition, exactly, for the paper. So.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was when the country first started, it was a thing
Right,
where
that's that-
everyone was told to grow hemp to build the country, right?
One of the first laws ever
Yeah.
was, yes, it was like in Jamestown in like
Yeah,
1600.
Yeah, I
They
just
were
read that. It said,
required
but it was a law with grow hemp, so, because I mean, you figure all the sales, everything, all the everything was made from hemp.
The,
So, in order to build the country,
in the 18th
you had to grow
century-
hemp to build the country.
Right.
in the 18th century, I make a point of this in the book, and it's kind of a broad point. People think I'm crazy for making it, but it's true. Hemp along with steel and lumber. The three together were called naval stores, right? And the three together were what you needed in mass in order to have a navy. Ships, great ships were made with wood, steel, and hemp. Wood, obviously, the ship, steel, the cannon, everything like that. Hemp, everything else, including the sealant on the ships that made the water not come in,
The oil,
and
yeah,
the clothes on the sailor, and the charts, and everything, the sails, of course. I forget what it is, some ridiculous length of rope on every ship, right?
Yeah.
And now a ship like that, right, was a dreadnought ship like that was the equivalent of an atomic bomb.
Right.
If you wanted to be a major power, you had a fleet of ships. If you didn't have a fleet of ships, you conquered somebody who did have either hemp. So that's why the Russians, the English and Spanish were the Russians. They wanted the Russian hemp, and it goes on for 50 to 100 years. But basically, hemp was the atomic bomb of the 18th century. If you had those three things together, you would need all three of them together. If you had them, you were a major power. When they came to the United States, hemp was, when the English and the Dutch and everything came to the United States, they knew about hemp. This is my favorite story of marijuana. Okay, I'll tell you this really fast, because I could do this for an hour. I'm not going to. Okay. About 100 miles southwest of Philadelphia is Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In 1760, Lancaster, Pennsylvania was the wilderness. After that, it was Indians and you're dead. Okay, Lancaster was as far as you could go. It was also the first Jewish settlement in the United States. There was three of them. This was one of the three. Okay, there was a guy, Joseph Simon. He was the merchant in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. His idea was he sent all of the trappers out into the desert. I know it's out.
This one I haven't heard.
Yeah, he sent the trappers out into the hinterland, out west of Lancaster. And they'd go out for a season, go out for 6-8 months at a time, and they come back with beaver furs. And he would take the beaver furs and he would send them to Philadelphia. They would then send to England, where they would trim the aristocrats and trim their books. And then they, in turn, would send trinkets and stuff back to this guy and he'd sell it to the stores. So he did it, right? It was a Jewish thing. They sent it to the Jewish merchant houses. And so this is how they got their start. Well, he would tell these guys, these trappers, go out there for a year, come on back. You don't need any money to go out. I'm going to give you a Conestoga wagon, a hemp-covered wagon, and I'm going to fill it full of blankets. And here's the trinkets that I got from England, and tin plates and stuff, but a lot of blankets. You go out there and you trade with the Indians. They love the blankets. They love the blankets. Give them the blankets, give them the blankets. You go out there and trade with the Indians. He goes, and come back and bring me as many beers. Here's how much you can pay me back when you get it. Okay? By the way, when you get out there, you're a surveyor. Everybody knows a surveyor. Survey the land. Make sure you break it off in the thing. Come back. Okay? We'll record it. He did it for years, 20 years. Send them all out. They all come back. He'd say, okay, come back here and say, I got 300 beaver fur for you. Right, I owe you $200. It's $180. I stole you $20. A lot of money. Stole you $20. He goes, did you do that thing I told you about the surveying? Yeah, I surveyed it. Did you say, yeah. So I'll tell you what, you give me that, sign it over to me here, and we'll call you. Again and again and again and again and again and again and again until him and his sons-in-law, over a period of 40 years, owned the Ohio Valley. Pretty much owned the Ohio Valley, what we now know as southern Illinois, southern Indiana. These guys were not trying to make a business. They were trying to start a nation, right? The 13 colonies, we think of them as 13 colonies. They weren't 13 colonies. They were 13 separate nations after they got away from the English. They were, until the Declaration, until the Constitution, there were 13. Jefferson did not think of himself as a United States citizen. He thought of himself as a Virginian, right? Everybody knew who owned the 13 waterlogged colonies. They were owned by the people in England. Maryland was owned by Mary, and Delaware was Lord Delaware's, and Duke of York owned Lord Jersey owned Jersey, right? Nobody knew who owned the interior. They were Indians. But sure enough, if you get up to the Mississippi, you hit the French. And so the French said they owned it. And the Virginians said that Virginia goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Well, these guys went out, this Joseph Simon and his family got a piece of land that was owned. They tried to make Vandalia, the nation of Vandalia. They tried to make it, and they couldn't get it done because there was a competitor. And the competitor was just south of the Ohio Valley.
Benjamin Franklin.
Close. The Virginia Company under George Washington. So George Washington, remember he was a surveyor? His job was to go west, go west and survey for the people he worked for, including his older brother and all their partners back in England. So a young man, 22, 23 years old, he goes off, he surveys, he comes back, he says, oh yeah, we own it all. Now it's all Tennessee and shit like that. And he said, oh, it's all ours, we got it. Well, then what happened was, everybody thinks that the United States Revolution was about the Declaration of Independence. In 1764, the king said, you can't make any more deals with the Indians for land. And everybody went crazy. You mean I can't even make a deal for that land? Now that belongs to you too? Everything belongs to the king? Fuck that. And that's when that was the beginning of them coming, of what became the revolution. George Washington, prior to that, had the American Indian Wars. He was a colonel in the American. That's where he got his reputation as a great military man. He routed the army at Pittsburgh. He defeated Pittsburgh. And he was a hero to his men. And if you were in the French and Indian Wars, what they did was they gave you 20,000 acres in the West. So if you went a soldier to Pittsburgh and fought for the Virginia Company, right? They'll give you 20,000 acres, but it'll be in bumfuck Tennessee, right? So after it was all over, and after all the king said you can't deal with the Indians anymore, George Washington, who is a hero, starts going systematically, or his agents go systematically to every one of the towns where all of his men live. Colonel Washington, he's not General Washington yet, he's Colonel Washington. Colonel Washington's here, that he meets at the taverns, he says, you boys, he goes, you fought hard, you've seen your brothers die, and now what have you got? He goes, I got 20,000 acres. Might as well have been on Mars. You'll never see that. He goes, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I want to see you because I'm going to give you 10 cents on the dollar for every acre. And he said, you need $1,200? You're going to give me $1,200? Instead of that piece of, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Boom, 1,200. Boom, boom, boom. Little known fact. When George Washington became the President of the United States, he was the largest landholder in the United States. He owned a piece of land the size of Rhode Island. There was two companies, the Virginia Company and the Vandalia Company, were vying for who could make the next country. Guess who won? He's on our dollar bill. and Joseph Simon and his family, they became filthy rich. But that's all. And that's that.
But that's all.
That's all.
They're the losers in this story.
Yeah, exactly. They're the losers. And it goes on.
Wow,
That story goes. That story I just told you is one little story inside the story of this family and the Hemp family, Joseph Simon's family. And I traced the entire family all the way up through 1937, when the last descendant introduced the Philippines to each other. But that's another story. But the story of hemp followed this family. I followed the whole story all the way through Joseph Simon. These guys, with their hemp, they tried to create a new nation. They became unbelievably wealthy. They owned what was Lexington at the time. They went to Lexington, and his grandchildren went to Lexington, and they started Lexington, and there was 40 rope walks in Lexington, and 15% of every cotton bale that left the South, right? 15% of the weight was hemp. So if King Cotton was making $1 billion, hemp was making 15% of $1 billion. And so And so they would make all these hemp in Lexington, all these rope walks, and literally, I mean, there was hundreds of them at some point. And they made them in Lexington, Kentucky, and they sent all the hemp down the Mississippi River, where in the lower south they had the cotton and all that. And it was great until the Civil War came. In the Civil War, they literally had the Battle of the Hemp Bales. It's one of the great battles of the Civil War. It took place in Lexington and out in the Union. They put up the hemp bales to try and shield, but the Union shot hot fire into it. The hemp bales caught on fire, and it all fell down. But anyway, that was all one family. It was all one family there. The first Jew to marry into like a high-end Roman Protestant family in Lexington. Think of Gone with the Wind if they had 8 beautiful daughters, right? The most beautiful one was the youngest one, and she married the most successful man in town, who was a Jew. It was the first time they had like a Jewish kind of the wedding. You know, we were on the frontier, so the old they came from an Orthodox Jewish family. You never think about marrying a Protestant. And the Protestants forget it, you know, but now and that was the beginning of this incredible family that gave, you know, married a vice president, blah, 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 they married into the family of Abraham Lincoln, married into all this crazy stuff. But all to do with him. It's like woven through the American experience in ways that even I didn't know. You know, we talk about, they did George Washington smoke hemp or something like that. It's much more
Most Americans don't even know.
involved.
Well,
Then
wasn't
just
the War of
that.
1812 over hemp?
Yeah, War of 1812 was over
China
hemp.
cut
That was,
the hemp trade
guys,
too.
actually,
Yeah.
the War of
Whatever.
1812 was part of a world war. That was
Yeah.
the war that was in Russia, France, England, and Spain. And that's what we're not trying to get there.
At school, it's always that like
Impressment.
little kind of word that has like a whole like paragraph on it, and they don't really
Right.
teach anything about it. It's just like
It's very
Right.
complicated, too.
It's weird.
It's a very
It's
complicated
They
term.
never say anything about hemp.
I tried to figure
Oh,
it
yeah,
out, the War of
hemp because
1812.
Marijuana, it's just,
No, I tried to figure it out, the War of 1812, and it's very complicated because the actual reasons they went to war were very complicated. They weren't just one reason, but hemp wasn't a major thing, and that was, and it was even more so in Europe, because in Europe, the Europe faction of the War of 1812 was really about like Spain needed they needed Spanish wood, and they needed Russian hemp, and the British barricaded. France wanted and Spain wanted to come into Russia, and the British barricaded and wouldn't let them come in. That led to that. But that was it. That was 1812. That was the War of 1812. Yeah, it's a big story. I'm going to tell that story one day. I want to write like an ebook about the history of hemp in the United States and tell all that weird story, but just that family.
They will.
You know, the people who don't support it, sad to say, people, and I said this at the last meeting too, people
What
who
was the
have
word?
really hard, die-hard beliefs about anything, they will
Right.
not be reasonably or logically convinced out of that.
Look at
It's sad
kamikaze.
to say that they need something traumatic to happen to them. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be that catalyst, but
But not even that won't happen to them. 30%.
they just won't
30% of the American people will not have anything to do
Right.
with this.
just won't have the
He
conversation.
refused to sell me a puppy at Christmas time. I bought a puppy for my daughter at Christmas time. It was going to be delivered. We had done this, and he's going to be sent to me from Virginia. And they got in touch with me 3 days later, and said, I didn't hear from them. Where's my puppy? And they said, I found out that you have to do with drugs. I can't have anything. Wow, walk away.
It's another thing, actually. We need to get a list of businesses that like support reefer.
Marijuana-friendly
that
businesses.
maybe donate against reefer too.
Yeah, I mean, you have
And
to.
get
Yeah.
people in a movement to do conscious consumerism.
I think that's the best point that we could actually drive home, I think, in my opinion, because, you know, they say money is political speech, right? So every time you buy something, you're voting for something. So, yes, we should absolutely be going to businesses that support our cause, and if they don't, not giving them a cent.
In Colorado, actually, there was a Starbucks that was donating against the legalization bill, and then
Oh, oh,
normal
exactly.
and stuff, they started like a phone bank and just kept calling them, telling them that, like, you know, you guys suck for doing that, and then they stopped it. They changed the stance.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hard to
And
get
then-
businesses to stand up. you know.
Yes, yes, because
they-
businesses are
they've
afraid
got
of
a
their
lot to
bottom
lose.
line, so they're afraid of how they're gonna be viewed, you know, they kinda go.
I mean, yeah, because Starbucks has that whole like progressive thing.
Right,
So it's
yeah.
surprising.
Yeah,
that
right,
they
yeah.
support.
Wasn't it true like Snapple,
Snapple, that's-
every, like what percent of the, when you buy a Snapple goes to the cause against?
They used, I believe, last I heard,
Really? Yeah,
they donate,
Snapple,
donate
every time you buy a
a few
Snapple,
$100
like,
million.
say it costs $1.20 of that cents goes for a cause to fight against.
I didn't know
They
that.
used
Yeah.
to donate.
Snapple.
I won't drink Snapple anymore.
I'm
No
not sure if it's still
Snapple.
true, but
That's
Rick can
good.
tell you who's the
Boycott
largest
Snapple.
funder
Not
of
go to that.
prohibition support.
The largest, oh, you mean, Campy's guy?
Huh?
Campy's guy? Who are you talking
The, well, alcohol, the alcohol lobby.
Oh, the alcohol
yeah.
lobby. Oh, no, actually, I don't know.
Aren't they the largest
A lot of people say
funders?
that. A lot of people say that.
Anheuser-Busch, no?
Maybe. I mean, well, my feeling is that you know, they got their own problems. You know, they got their own problems. They got their own death toll that they have
That's
to
true.
deal with. Everybody thinks that the what do you call it? Tobacco companies are the ones that's going to grow weed.
Yeah.
You know, not in a million years.
No
man. They're
way.
killing 400,000 people a year. They're going to start throwing drugs with the reputation that marijuana has. You know? Now I think the people that are anti-marijuana are if you look really carefully at all of the political discourse and well, you know, and on this side. It's going to be a 30% you can get. Okay, let's have free lunches for everybody in the entire world, and let's have, you know, you can get these wild extremes on either side. And I think the people that are anti-marijuana are the ones on that extreme, that are down there with the abortion people. You know, it's a culture.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the culture wars, and the culture wars are very real, and they're very profound. And those sons of bitches never gave it up. You know, they never gave. Maybe we didn't give it up. I don't know. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do. But like to me, when George Bush II went in, Rumsfeld was and Cheney were working in the Nixon office, and actually Cheney was under Rumsfeld. Cheney was Rumsfeld's assistant, and those guys really took it. You know, that they threw out Nixon and that whole thing, and that culture war that got started there, they never forgot that. When they came in, they did their thing. So that's what I think it is. I think that marijuana is part of a culture war that they haven't forgotten. You know, and by the way, that's the other thing too is the war against marijuana was really a war by Ronald Reagan. You know, they did some stuff in the '60s, but not really. You know, not really. I was just when I was in your car, I was talking to the Huffington Post, and they wanted to go on yesterday, tomorrow about should we legalize all drugs? We're going to legalize marijuana. Should we legalize all drugs? I said, well, I personally might have that feeling, but a lot of people I work with don't feel that way. They're very, very strong, and it's only about marijuana and stuff. I said, but Nixon, nobody understands it. Nixon went up against hard drugs and was the only president who had 2/3 of his drug war budget was for rehabilitation, and 1/3 was for law enforcement, and it worked. And now it's like 90% is for law enforcement, and they give a token thing to rehabilitation, and it worked. They actually but it was politically untenable. He couldn't keep it up because he was given methadone to junkies.
But it really is a public health issue. I mean,
It's
not
public
really.
health.
Right, right.
That's right. And that's the thing. This woman was just asking me on the phone, what do you think? I said, I think it should be medicalized, not criminalized. That's what there is drug problem. There's a drug problem, for real. It's, I know people, you know, there's a real drug problem.
No, there is.
You know, we got to do something about it. But criminalizing didn't work.
You've seen in your lifetime, one guy can do this drug and
Right.
know, no big deal. One guy does
Right,
it once, man, and the
right.
next day he's
Yes.
looking for it, you know?
Right, it has to
And
do
it's
with the person,
freaky how
the
it-
situation.
Yeah,
Right,
they
right.
just become addicted. I don't know. What-
I've done every drug in the world, and
I'm a child of the '70s, man.
Yeah.
You know, we tried everything.
so I never had a problem with any of them, right?
Neither.
But I was a vicious alcoholic, and I haven't drank in 26 years. But I mean, I was up to the point where if I didn't stop drinking that month, I was going to be dead. You know, that kind of thing. And to this day, I have no idea why drugs didn't overtake me
And why that?
and alcohol did.
And it's different for everyone.
And I don't know. I just don't
Never
know.
know.
Yeah, but it certainly did. You know, and then and my best friend growing up, he was overtaken by heroin. The exact same. You know, we were best friends.
LSD
Right,
didn't
right.
do it.
Smart.
Cocaine didn't
he
do
was-
it.
Yeah, right. But boom, that was it. Next thing you know, he was living on a
One
block in the
heroin,
street.
boom, that's it. He's done.
That's right. So people do different drugs for different reasons. Everybody says, "Oh, drugs." Like
Right,
someone's
right,
like, "Oh,
right, right.
I do drugs," you know.
What is that?
But the person who did, in my experience, people that like heroin don't like weed because people like do heroin don't. They want to
Yeah,
they darken. They
No,
want to
no.
put the lights down, you know, if not totally take them off. And weed makes you think. Weed makes you instead of that, and junkies don't like to do that. So people, and then psychedelics are something totally different. There are people that do psychedelics that have nothing to do with anything else. It's what they do. You know, so, but I don't know. The marijuana thing is inarguable. We can sit here and argue about whether or not this is good or that's good. Marijuana, as far as I'm concerned, those 30%, the anti-marijuana people you're talking about,
Yeah.
they're just naysayers about so many things. You know,
You don't think they can be convinced by the cost of this?
Right,
I mean, it's
the
not
tax money,
unfortunate.
tax it,
I-
put it back into society.
the best thing that happened to this movement is that the economy tanked.
No shit, right?
Suddenly, everybody took a
That's a fact.
second look at what we were doing.
Maybe this
Yeah.
will be the
And
answer
the
to
second
get out
best
of
thing
it.
that's happened to this movement is that the Republicans are imploding. Because the Republicans are going to have to give up a few things,
Right,
a few
right, right.
cherished things if they're going to remain. One of them's going to be gay marriage, pretty obviously,
Yeah.
right? And the other thing, they're going to give up the weed.
Yeah.
Because they don't care. They
It's
got a
easy.
bunch of libertarians, and they don't care about the weed.
It's easy.
You know, they want no taxes, and they want, they want a whole bunch of other things. But I think that this is going to be the one thing they're going to say, well, we'll give you the weed.
And if they don't, then they'll be usurped as the second political party.
Yeah.
That's
Which
just all there
is-
is to it. They'll find themselves in a permanent minority, and that's real.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I hear that. I hear that as if it's a fait accompli. I'm not sure it's a fait accompli.
Well, more likely is
Things
that they're
can
going to give on those issues,
If
and
they
then
can see it.
they'll stay there. That's
Right.
Yeah.
like the most likely thing to happen.
If they
But that-
imploded, who would represent that faction? Somebody.
The libertarians.
You're never gonna get the middle road Republican on the way.
That's maybe
Money,
true.
man.
You know, the
Big
Democrats
money.
might win every election, but that's who would
That's
replace
who
the
it would be.
Republicans.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
That's just the way it
Hey,
is.
some smart guy's gonna start another one.
That's what I can run for president.
There you go.
Be like, sure, I've been arrested, whatever.
That's I wear my number right here. I would try. How could in my generation, you can't be a righteous man unless you're arrested.
The only place for a decent man is
That's
in
right,
jail.
it's in jail. That's right. That's right.
It still holds true.
Nah,
Okay, what's the percentage of
Did you
people
get arrested?
that have been arrested in the
I've been
population?
arrested.
Right?
Yeah, I was.
I had a clean record.
I was.
Don't brag about it.
I was 18.
young.
I was heading home from my buddy's house.
I
I actually was completely sober, and me and my friend had gone to the diner and had food. My driver took a nap because he was a little drowsy. We got back, woke him up, he gave me a ride home. Cops pulled us over. I don't know, he was swerving, or maybe he had a tail light out. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Once they pulled us over, asked us to get out of our cars. We were 18, didn't know our rights. We got out, let them search the car.
Oh.
It's always what happens.
Yeah,
It's
they
always you never know- you don't know.
oddly. Oh man, So,
So there's weed in there?
oddly enough, yeah, there was, believe it or
Yeah.
not, there was some weed in the center console, and the officers found it, and they said, "Whose is this?" And we were like, the one thing we did know is that we didn't have to say anything, so we both got arrested.
Yeah.
And, yeah, spent the night in jail. Thank God they didn't find my weed.
Did they
You know,
drop
because then we were able to get high after we got out of jail.
There you
That
go.
was awesome. True story, I actually had it on my person the whole time.
No kidding.
Yeah, my buddy,
In your underwear?
we got pulled over, and he tossed, I feel fucking guilty even saying it, but it's such a good story. He was like, "Here, hold this." I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And, and so like I shoved it in my pants and everything. They found he literally had, it might have been a gram. Yeah, like a little glass vial like this. I don't think it was quite a gram of marijuana. That's what they found. We spent the night through lockup. They brought us in, questioned us and everything. I had my shit in my crotch in a cigarette pack, and you know they never found it. They never found it. I had some hash on me too. You know,
Wow.
they let us out at sunrise, and me and my buddy went up to the lake, and we smoked the whole thing.
That's
Back
cool.
home. Yeah, and it was odd because when we got pulled in, you know, the cops who were there going, "Hey, patrolman so and so, what do you got there?" And he walks in, he's got the little vial, and he goes and slams it down on the counter, and all the cops there started laughing at him. That's why you're still just a patrolman, you know, like making fun of them. Put these high school kids in there. Come on, make sure they don't hang themselves with their shoelaces, you know.
Did they drop the charges?
So what ended up happening, we went to court, and you know, we both had public defenders, and mine says whose was it, and you know, they found his weed. They never found mine. We smoked it, you know. So I was like, yeah, that was his weed. They're like, well, will he take the rap for it? And I was like, I don't know. My buddy and my buddy's an upstanding guy. He did. He was like, that was my weed. I mean, it's not like we weren't both smoking, but I hid mine and it didn't get found, and he left. He was like, here, hold it, you know. So like, he kind of did it, and but man, they threw the book at him. They put him on probation for a year. They did give him a conditional discharge, but unlike most of the other people that I hear with their probation, he did have to go to Patterson once a month and piss in a cup.
Okay.
Yeah,
Patterson.
yeah.
Why?
Yeah, more fines too. Yeah, it's awful. We were,
What kind of fines?
gosh, $3,000 or something like that. A lot of money. Plus court fees. You know.
Yeah, it's fucking nuts.
When we did a third of a joint, and they asked us, that's, we went up.
Right.
We went to the whole number, and they said, can we see the evidence? He held up this huge bag with a third of a joint. And he goes, you gotta be kidding me.
The judge said that?
And, so.
Is this your marijuana?
Yeah.
The judge said that?
Oh, yeah, he goes, you gotta be kidding me. He goes, right. And so the judge, what happened was we went
This
all
was
the
the
way up.
Supreme Court, the state
Well,
Supreme
yeah,
Court,
we went all the
right?
way up,
So-
and then it got thrown back down for sentencing.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, we went for a jury trial. We got a jury convened. They waited about 15 minutes and found us guilty because we weren't guilty. And then we appealed that, and then then they upheld that. Then we appealed that, and they appealed that, and then we went to the Supreme Court, and they refused to hear our case.
Back
So
down.
that's, yeah, at that point. So they sent it back down to the lower court for sentencing. So now we're sentenced 2 years later. And by now, they literally got the number one prosecutor in the state on this case because we were working with Harvard Law School.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what the fuck was going on. God forbid that, we actually overturned constitutionality of marijuana law. So they did all this stuff. So now, they decriminalized marijuana in the past 2 years, and it's a fine. But Keith and I were grandfathered under the old law. And so the prosecutor gets up and he says, and I swear to God, I know I told you this one, because this one's...
Yeah, this was the first story you told me.
Yeah, because this is a great law story. It's like the law story.
I looked it up.
Yeah, did it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Is there any of that in there? The thing that's it?
No,
It's just a law. It's
Just pretty much the
case. Yeah, they got the whole thing on normal. on the
I'll
website.
give the end of it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So where was I in this story?
So you got sent down for sentencing.
Oh, so we sat down for sentencing, and he goes, they asked us, the prosecutor, what he recommended. And he said,
Good.
well, they was under the old law, and these out-of-state people have come here now and
Troublemakers.
agitated. These out-of-state agitators.
Troublemakers.
And I think that the full force of the previous law should be given to them. And so they asked for 6 months, suspended sentence, contingent upon 2 years probation. You gotta remember, we don't live in Massachusetts. They want us to show up every now and then in Massachusetts with probation, right? 50 hours of community service cleaning up the Boston Commons where we were arrested. $500 fine, and he added that we be prohibited from entering the Boston Commons for a period of 2 years, quote, which should prevent them from making any more speeches, unquote.
Freedom
Now,
of speech, oh.
I mean, you know, we're in a fucking, we were in and like, did you guys go to law school? They call it the First Amendment. Were you not in school that day? You know, did they miss that one, you know?
That kills me.
And they
So it must have cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to pursue that case all the way through. when it
probably,
was
so that's what he said, and that's why they were pissed off about it.
Yeah.
I
They were
gotta,
pissed.
but so then they said that, and then they asked our guys what we thought should happen. And he said, given the professional nature of of the case, a monetary fine is appropriate, $500 fine. So the judge says, okay, this is normally the part I go back into my chamber and I think about it, and I come back with a decision, but I don't have to think about this at all. With the 2 gentlemen stand up, and he said, I sentence you to 1 day's incarceration, limited to the time that you were in the custody of the Boston Police Department on the day of your arrest.
Done.
Everybody go home.
Okay.
And then I got a picture of me, Keith, my entire legal team, and the prosecutors, and all standing like this in front of the bench.
Buddies.
Yeah, because we've been through 2 years of this shit. And an hour ago, this guy wanted to see me fucking swing. And now I'm taking this picture with him. And, yeah, so, you know, they try to get it, but they didn't get it.
That's funny, because I didn't see that part. So when first time I met Rick was while he was going through all
Really?
this.
Okay,
And we were down in Rutgers,
Right.
and you gave a speech about it, and real fired up about fighting the constitutionality. And I remember, you know, you told the story, like, in the beginning, the officer or the judge was like, all right, we're going to have this dismissed, and your lawyer's like, all due respect,
that's a good
no,
part, yeah.
we're going to fight this, no, and it went up and up. So I went to see, because I knew that he got off, and I was like, well, what could have possibly happened? So I looked it up in Westlaw, and it's a legal database. You find all the cases, and I found your case, and just a very short brief, and basically the verdict at that juncture, because I guess it wasn't addressing the rest of the charges. It was about the constitutionality part.
Oh, right, there was like 4 or 5 things.
Right. That case that charge was dismissed, but not because it was unconstitutional. It was there's like some kind of discretionary dismissal where it doesn't actually serve as precedence or anything. It was like an administrative dismissal as opposed to like being an invalid charge
Right, so it
or
couldn't be a
unconstitutional or
precedent.
something. So it couldn't be precedent, but it basically said, you know, this is a violation of his free speech, but we're not going to allow him to use that constitutional argument. It was basically
I remember
what
when
it came
they
down
threw out our
to.
constitutional thing.
Right.
They threw out our...
That was because of a state law, the
Right.
state administrative code.
I remember they threw out our constitutional complaint. They threw out our jury nullification complaint. He wouldn't let it go there.
Right.
But that's not going to go there.
I mean, but this was entirely a free speech issue. That's exactly what it was. I mean, he was there as a political activist talking about reforming marijuana laws.
Right,
Like,
right,
him
right.
smoking that joint is free speech.
Right.
You know, in
And no
the
context.
purest sense of the word.
Yeah.
And they weren't
At least
happy.
that's what I said after they caught me.
Still talking.
motherfucker. Give my speech back. Can I finish my speech before you take me? They told us, they said, when they arraigned us, that they said, okay, get out of here, you can't go back into the park. They had a rally going that day. But then the cop said, but you can go back in the park. You were in there and you climbed over the fence. And me and Keith's like 62 years old, we climbed over a fucking fence. And the thing is that it wasn't a fence, it was a wall. And it was a wall from, the old days, because it's the thing. And the amazing thing is that they said, okay, that should keep them from making any more speeches. That's where they died for speeches, for free speech. Like right there. That's where they died. It's like consecrated fucking ground. The guy said that. And we had, so we snuck back in and we made a speech that day. So we were just arrested. You got it. Yeah. It doesn't get more surreal. That was the most surreal thing that's ever happened in this business. And now I'm about to talk about it. And that is that the Cannabis Cup on 420. I'm a ordained reverend in the Church of Universal Light, and I've married people before, and they got in touch with me, and I will be marrying a couple on 420 at 420 at the Cannabis Cup.
That is nice.
Yeah, that doesn't get more surreal than that.
Isn't it in Colorado this year?
Yeah, well, it's legal in Colorado, so
Yeah.
we're having literally the first legal
time.
Cannabis Cup ever.
In America.
Ever. It's not legal in Amsterdam. It's tolerated in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, it's
There's
decriminalized.
there's no legal. It's not legal anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere, right?
Alright.
And I remember the week after they legalized it in Colorado, I went out for a party. I literally went one day for a party. I had a big hash party on a Friday. I flew out Friday afternoon, went to the party, came home Friday morning. And I went to my hotel, and I went on the balcony, and I smoked a joint. I had a joint with me. I smoked a joint, and I was sitting there, and I realized, okay, I'm in my room, but I'm on the balcony. So the hotel is cool, all right? But I'm in my room, because the balcony is part of my room. So I'm in the privacy of my residence, so Colorado is cool. And I'm sitting on that balcony saying, this is the first legal joint I've ever smoked in my entire life. I'm 58 years old. I've never smoked a legal joint ever. I literally got goosebumps.
Strange.
I literally got goosebumps. I was like, holy shit. Holy shit. And then that night I went to the fucking party. It was at the Hashmakers party. And everybody literally was just walking around giggling. That's all they were doing. That's all they were doing. They were just walking around, smoking really good weed, and laughing at the fact that we can get away with this. There's nothing left to do.
So have they started like regulating it and selling it?
No, they haven't sold it. They're regulated on January 1.
Of
It'll
next
be
year.
sold. Right now, you can smoke it in the privacy of your home.
Yeah.
And
But
that's
you
not
can't
against
buy
the
it on the
law.
street.
There's no regulatory scheme for buying it. They're putting that in place now.
Yeah.
That should happen January 1. And I know a guy who's has about $500 million from Microsoft, and he's going to open 12 legal stores January 1 in Colorado and 12 legal stores January 1 in Washington State.
So I can just give you my resume?
I heard about that.
Yeah, he's in
I
four
saw that.
That's the guy, yeah. That's the guy you want to do.
I saw him on Fox.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Fox Business or something.
Right, Jamin, yeah. We met, and
What's his
I
name?
said,
I want to start a hemp farm. I think you'll help me with that.
huh?
I want to start a hemp farm.
A hemp farm. Oh,
Yes.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Weed farm, man. Not the hemp farm. Weed
Thanks,
farm.
Rick, what was his name?
Jamin Shively. Shively. And he, really smart guy, really nice guy. And he only started smoking pot a couple of years ago. And he changed his life. He said, my God, I never left harder in my life. I never felt better in my life. Years and then I've been looking for something to do. I have all this money and I've been looking for something to do. And then I realized he lives in Washington State.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, I could do it right here. He goes, in Red I was smoking a joint with a friend of mine. We were talking about, we started talking about opening up one store. And then we said, well, why not opening one store? Why don't we start a chain and make it synonymous with was the Neiman Marcus of marijuana.
Mhm.
Wow. And I said, yeah. So anyway, the reason I met with him is he needs to know who that is. He needs to know who the best pot producers are, and the best hash producers. I turned him on to 3 or 4 guys. Because I said to him, I said, you can have all the money in the world, you're not going to buy the best weed. You're going to have to find the best weed.
Yeah.
It's not something you can, you can go to the guy who grows the best roses in the world and say, okay, now grow the best weed. It's not going to work like that. You got to find the guy who knows how to do it, and that's for real. And the standards already exist. You're not creating the standards. Just and so now there's a bunch of hippies I know out in Colorado who are like, they really love me right now. And I sent them a billionaire who's going to come in and pay them more money than they ever thought they would make in their life. Because he says, I'm going to shoot the price up. Because you buy from me, it's going to be the best weed in the world. But
It's gonna cost you.
yeah, it'll cost you. And he said it'll be like champagne. He goes, if I'm going to have selling it to rich people who want the best and only appreciate the best, but also like a limousine service. Everybody who's going to get married, everybody on your 18th birthday,
Right.
on your 21st birthday, that kind of thing. You want to? It goes, and we're gonna brand it.
That's clever.
When
Yeah,
you
brand.
come and you're going to see this is a great story. This guy's great grandfather, or maybe grandfather, I forget his name. His name is like something like Emilio Picadillo, something like that, Picador, right? And he was Spanish, and he was the Spanish governor of the Philippines when it was Spain. And he was also the biggest hemp farmer. He owned the biggest hemp plantations in the Philippines, which is why he was the Spanish governor of the Philippines. That was their thing. And then the Americans came in and took over the Philippines and hanged him.
Oh.
And so his grandfather, so his grandfather was the #1 hemp producer in the Philippines, and the American government hung him. So he's taking his $500 million and he's putting hemp back on the planet and putting his grandfather's name on it. And it's his grandfather's, the revenge for the United States for hanging my grandfather in the first place. I'm going to legalize weed in the United States and make my grandfather's name synonymous with the best weed.
Awesome.
What a great fucking story! I gotta write that story, man. That's a great story.
That'd give you goosebumps.
Yeah. The old man's smiling up in heaven. But yeah, that's what's happening now. All these marijuana entrepreneurs are coming out of the woodwork. Money. That's why I say it's going to happen in Massachusetts, because they're throwing money at Massachusetts right now. They want it badly. I mean, not just Massachusetts people, but they really reform industry really wants Massachusetts to pop. Because if Massachusetts pop, that means that marijuana legalization is A, not a West Coast phenomena, and B, not an initiative phenomenon. It's something you can vote in, and there'll be a framework for doing it, and it'll give us a toehold in the Northeast. So it's really important. So that's the next one.
What do you see for the momentum seems to be really kind of growing.
Yeah, huge. I mean, we hit this moment last year, a year ago, October, when we just passed the USA Today poll, said, and the Gallup confirmed that over 50% of American people were for legalization. That was the first time that ever happened. And so that was a significant, 50%, 50%. And then, right after that, on the heels of it, bam, it looked like they were going to legalize. It looked like it. Oh my God, they're really going to legalize? Son of a bitch, bam, they legalized. And so 50% became 52, 53, maybe even 54. So once you start talking those kind of numbers, they become self-fulfilling. And, at that point.
I think this has been happening for longer than that. Because I'm in my mid-50s, and I have a great friend in Georgia, and he's a judge.
Right.
And we used to smoke pot all the time. And I told him one time, I said, John, you can't, the criminal thing is to put these kids in jail for the simple possession, because of the recidivism. you know, once they're in there, they just become criminals.
Gotta
learn
how to do it, that's right.
Why would
Exactly.
you want
Yeah.
to do that, you know? He's like, you're right, and he started a program down there
Who was there?
in Georgia. And,
Wow.
a ton of other judges started contacting him, because instead of putting kids in jail, he sentenced them to school.
Huh.
If you don't go to school and get grades, blah, 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 I'm gonna put you in jail.
That's a good one, yeah.
And then they got their shit together, and most of them stay
Learn
on jail.
about what you're smoking
We have-
instead
And
of going to
stupid
jail.
little drug
In the
charges.
70s, there was like 38% of people, mostly young,
Kids.
wanted marijuana legalized. And
Yeah.
then over the years, it went up and down, in the 80s it went down a little ways. And then in the 88, it started picking up again.
Yeah.
And then it started to climb. And then it went to 30s and in the low 40s, and it hung in the low 40s until the 21st century. In the 21st century, medical marijuana started becoming
Right.
ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And then it came up and it inched up, it inched. So it took all those years, 20 years, to get 15 points,
Yeah.
right? And then, in the last
Cool.
year and a half, we nailed another 3 points.
Good.
And we'll nail another 3 points, you know, knock wood, if nothing, you know, if the ship don't,
Yeah.
well, you know, whatever. I
It's like
know.
bullshit, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, what's his name, Kennedy? That's it, Patrick Kennedy?
Yeah, kid, yeah.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, he comes out of nowhere, and now he's the world's biggest anti-marijuana guy. He's latching it on to, this is what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna come out and, you know, and,
What the fuck is wrong
Yeah.
with these guys?
huh?
What the fuck is wrong with these guys?
Wait, first of all, there's lots of evidence that the Kennedys smoked weed. There's lots of evidence, there's an actual, there's an actual,
I've been really noticing the smoke with JFK in the White House
no,
too.
definitely not.
So he did it twice.
No,
Two
definitely
different
not.
groups.
Definitely not. But JFK probably smoked weed because a woman that he was having an affair with, Judith Exner,
Oh, that's right, yeah.
right? She said that she smoked weed with JFK, and her somebody who's not related to her, but her friend or something like that, was the brother-in-law of the editor of the Washington Post. We're not talking about, it's just somebody here. And he said, I brought them the weed in the hotel.
That's good.
Yeah, so he went on,
Yeah.
and she wound up dead. She wound up
No
dead
shit.
in a thing. Yeah. So that's
Oh,
another.
boy.
That was a whole. I mean, I'm not a conspiracist. I don't believe in that stuff.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's pretty good credible evidence that JFK smoked weed. If JFK smoked weed, undoubtedly, well, Bobby Kennedy did too. They did everything together.
My daughter is going to be writing a 4-part series for the Washington Post
On what?
on cancer. She's
Oh,
26
oh, that's right.
She's 26 years old.
Is that right?
And in that piece, there's going to be something about marijuana.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I don't know
hope
if you guys
so.
can use that.
We could definitely use it. Post it up all over the place. We can, even send copies of it to our
If she
reps.
needs any information or anything like that, resources or anything, I can be happy to help. Like
Well,
getting
you
numbers.
should consult, you should consult with it, because whatever we can exploit this opportunity as.
Yep.
Let's exploit the opportunity, because it's, from what I see, it's just an education, because even in my peers, right, like on Facebook, like I stuck up there, New Jersey Medical Marijuana Leaf and a freaking normal thing, blah, 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 dead silence.
Yeah.
Nobody thought it was that. I know all these guys were heads when I was a kid.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right,
All
right.
this, man. But now they've grown up and they've gone, some of them become, fearful and super straight or whatever. But I know they all know that
Well, yeah.
pot is
I'm
big
58.
shit, you know?
I'm 58, and everybody in my high school I got high with, back then,
Yeah.
everybody's getting high. And now Facebook came up, and for me, from my perspective, Facebook is the machine by which every girl I ever dated my entire life gets back in touch with me.
Yeah.
Right? And suddenly all these people are back
They
in my
won't
life.
shut up.
They were gone for fucking 30 years, now I know where they are and who they
Yeah,
are
really.
and everything like that, right? And they all look at me. And first of all, I look exactly like I looked in high school, except it's gray.
Yeah, right.
I'm wearing the exact same clothes. I had the same the same thing. And they do not look like, they look almost to a man and woman like our parents. And then they see I'm the guy from High Times, and I'm still smoking weed, and I'm not doing hot weed, and it's like, you talk about silence. Silent.
Like
But once in a while, somebody comes up and says, "Wow, that's really cool." What are you
It's
doing?
weird.
Yeah. So one girl from she was like a black activist. I went to a black high school in New York, and she was a really hot, like Angela Davis kind of thing. You know, I knew her, and I didn't think about her ever since high school. And then we went on Facebook, and apparently she's one of my Facebook friends. I didn't even know because she has an African name now. I'm the same person. And then she Facebooked me one day. She personally messaged me. She goes, "This is, yeah, blah, 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 whatever her name is. I used to be Letitia." She goes, "You did not disappoint." That was her own message.
That's the best, yep, that's to the heart.
I don't even know who you are, but thank you very much. Nah, weed is a pretty, you want, you want to find out intelligence, ask somebody about what they think about weed. You know, because if they're knee-jerk, I don't mind if people have no opinion.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't mind if people have no opinion about it. If they have an idiot opinion, I can't help but give a very informed.
I think it's just ignorance. You know, it's like.
You know, it's been a long time. I mean, they've been at this for 100. They've been at first marijuana, anti-marijuana was 1912.
Yeah.
State.
You know who the biggest opponent of it was?
Where?
The freaking American Medical Association.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Amen.
Yeah. Sure.
Unbelievable.
And American Medical Association.
It went to when it happened. And like 70% of the medicines had
Right.
cannabinoids.
Yeah. Well, it was also under a bigger thing because in 1911 they got rid of all the drugs, heroin, cocaine, that kind of thing, but not marijuana. And so they kind of had to come back around to that one
Yeah.
again. But in the meantime, the next 30 years before they got 25 years between getting rid of heroin and cocaine and getting rid of marijuana, they made the drug empires.
Right.
You know, Lucky Luciano and Arnold Rothstein, guys like that. Arnold Rothstein, you know, he's on Boardwalk Empire, he's on Boardwalk Empire, they do Arnold Rothstein. Arnold Rothstein is very, I mean, he's a psychopath, but he's a very cool psychopath. And he was unlike, he was in the mafia, but he was A, Jewish, B, very well dressed, like a step above all the other guys. All the other guys were like Lucky Luciano, guys like that, were younger and crazy.
Yeah.
He wasn't crazy, he was an accountant.
Business.
Right.
And what he invented, before they killed him, what he invented, which lasts to this day, is the International Drug Cartel. He invented it.
Really?
Yeah. They said, wait, okay, they outlawed heroin. There's a lot of people that want heroin. We can get it in China. Because here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send people to China. They're going to get the heroin. We're going to send it to, yeah, like Barcelona or something like that, where Africa and Europe meet. He goes, and from there, it's going to go to France, and from France to the United States. And he set that up. He put people in there. He did the whole thing. And then he started moving it and everything like that. And then when he died, Lucky Luciano and Bugsy Siegel and all those guys, they inherited his empire and they broke it up and took different pieces. But basically the business model was his. And that's the business model for the Mexican drug cartels. You know? I mean, he was the guy that said, this is not a bad law, this is an opportunity.
That's another crazy part of it. I mean, what's happening in Mexico? My God, man. It's like,
What?
what's happening in Mexico? I mean, the slaughter down
Oh,
there is
God,
unbelievable.
yeah. But that's also heroin as well,
Is it?
as well as pot. But yeah. But 1/3, well, more than that, 40% of the pot in the United States comes from Mexico still.
Still.
Yeah, still. When I was a kid, there was only 3 places you could get weed from in the United States. And that was from Colombia, Jamaica, or Mexico. Nothing came from the United States. Once in a while, you saw a Thai stick.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you saw a Hawaiian bud of some kind.
Panama.
Maui,
Panama Red.
Panama Red. But even Panama Red was from Mexico. But you know the 3 that was it. And now, literally, over 1,000 strains grown indigenously in the United States.
I think it's great, man. Keep the money up.
The plant has changed more in the last 50 years than it has in the last 10,000. You know, the
Well, I
prohibition
tell you,
and the interaction.
yeah, I mean, the strength compared to when we were kids.
Strength. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And it's being bred for everything
Shit.
these days, you know? I mean, it's unbelievable. They don't even breed for strength anymore. They've maxed strength,
Yeah,
and now they're breeding for other qualities.
yeah,
You know, taste and medical qualities and things like that. There's the THC that's on the matrix of leaf, you know, so there's THC that hangs on the leaf.
yeah.
They've maxed out the amount of trichomes that can sit on that surface.
Really?
That's it. This is as much as the architecture of the leaf will hold. Yeah. There's dabbing. You know what dabbing is?
The earwax?
Huh?
The earwax? Is it the
Yeah.
stuff?
Oh.
Love that.
Honey oil.
Love that.
Okay.
It's an oil. You take it. It's a different way of smoking it, but it's a processed oil, and it looks like butter, or it looks like oil, or it
Okay.
looks like peanut brittle. It's different things, but it's pot. But it's highly. So if you're talking about the best marijuana in the world, maybe is 27%
Yeah.
THC. Best, right? Maybe. Best hash in the world, 45.
Yeah,
Under 50%, right?
yeah.
The best oil in the world, over 90% THC. And then they do this dab thing where they heat it up. It looks very cracky. You put a blowtorch on a nail, and you get the nail red hot, and you take the oil and you touch it to it. It sizzles and disappears, and you're efficiently, combusting that oil, so that if it's 95% THC, you're getting 90% of that, because you're not losing it in smoke, you're not losing it in the thing, right? In the process, the combustion process. So you're getting not only are you getting really good pure, but it's bam, and you're high. And not only are you high, you're high like the first time you ever got high. Every time you're like, whoa,
Not an exaggeration.
whoa, whoa, I'm really fucking high. That kind of thing. Yeah. And now it's in Colorado. I had a guy, one of the best hash makers, dab makers, oil makers guys in the world, and he said, I am only limited by the amount of pot I can get my hands on. If you gave me 20 pounds of pot, I can make, you take a pound of pot and you can make an ounce of oil, right? And he says, you give me 20 pounds of pot, I'll make 20 ounces of oil. You make me 100 pounds of pot, I'll make 100, I'll get rid of it.
Yeah.
I can sell it all day long. I'm only limited by the amount of
By my inputs.
weed you can give me. Yeah, so that's where it's going right now.
Dabbing.
Yeah, and also you take the oil, there's also on pens.
Yeah.
You can put them on pens, and they have these little heat elements on the pen. It's not like dabbing in
How
the
about
sense.
those electronic cigarettes? You put them
That's what
in
it is. It's the electronic cigarette, but it's jiggered for this sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
And it's not like dabbing, because dabbing is a very hot process with
Right.
these torches, and it sizzles. And this is just, it heats it up and it makes the oil. But you got to remember, it's 95%, and you're hitting it, and it's very pure, and it's very tasty,
Yeah.
and you get very high.
You black out, yeah.
And, well, not with that, but
blackout to me is like
but
so
this-
fucking funny, you can't stand up.
this stuff
Can't feel
is
your
so stealth, that I got high while waiting for my luggage at the carousel in Denver Airport. I was waiting for my luggage. A guy shows up to the cup. He goes, "Hey, Nick, what's happening?" Yeah, he goes, "Yeah, I've been waiting for the luggage." He goes, "You want to get high?" So what do you mean? He goes, "Well, I got a pen." So he sat there and he took out the pen, took out the butter, put it in the pen, boom, 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 hit it, handed it. Now there's cameras all over the fucking place. Yeah, but they couldn't figure out what we were doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and no smell.
There's no smell, and they thought we were hitting an e-cigarette or something.
yeah,
And so it's a game changer.
yeah.
It's a game changer.
It's 95% THC, the other 5% is water.
Right.
So you're not going to cough or anything. It's
Yeah.
like the most pure thing that you can possibly get. And, and that's really the perverse thing when people talk about, oh, the weed's so much stronger. The fact is, when the weed's stronger, that means that there's more medicine in it, which means you'll be smoking less combusted plant matter, which is the piece that's actually bad.
That's
Yeah.
bad for you.
So
yeah.
this stronger stuff
I
is
mean,
really good for you.
Again, that self-loathing stoner thing. I hear this thing about self-loathing stoners. Everybody keeps apologizing for their weakness. Well, that's strong. Well, guess what? It still hasn't killed anybody in fucking 10,000 years. Fucking cigarettes killed 400,000 Americans last year. Alcohol killed 100,000. alcohol-related deaths are 28,000, right? That hasn't killed anybody ever. I don't care how strong it gets. So, like, you know, we talk about it being, oh, it's, well, this is stronger. This is not your grandfather's marijuana.
Right.
So
I hate
what?
that.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
stronger,
still
it's not
benign.
as bad for you as
Granddad's
smoke
weed.
less.
Yeah.
I can't wait
You
to
just smoke less, that's all, I mean.
If
Yeah,
that's
there
it,
you go, make it more efficient, more economical.
I mean, I'm at this point now, I don't apologize for anything. I'll smoke as much as I want. I'll smoke, I don't, but the point is, like, I went on TV, where was I, the other day? The Huffington Post. I was on the Huffington Post the other day, and they were talking about medicine. The guys on the side, well, I thought of medicine. I said, you know, that's very nice. I'm glad this, her name is Janet. I said, I'm glad Janet has her medicine and that the law allowed it. I don't smoke medicine. I smoke weed. I don't medicate. I get high. I like to get high. You know, and that my you know, dissent has to do with that. It doesn't have to do with medication and things like that. It has to do with the fact that you just leave me the fuck alone. You know, but yeah, you know, medicine is a kind of a, it's going to go to a certain spot, but then you have to jump.
Yeah.
You have to jump
Right.
off the medical
Yeah.
thing and go on to the next thing. Because
Well,
otherwise-
this, you know, I think it's just familiarization, you know, we get
Right.
people familiar with it, yeah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah.
Problem
There
with
are the hardcores that are, the goddamn politicians are so scared of, you know, whatever the
Well,
reason
in
is.
California, they made a medical law that was so broad that nobody thought they had to legalize it after that.
I know that.
And so they, when they got a legal thing, they lost it by 4 points. And the reason they lost it by 4 points is because so many people were making so much money the way it was, that they were willing to spend so much money saying, this is a bad law.
Don't change
This is
it.
a very, very, very bad law. And that was our guys doing that.
Yeah, don't change it, yeah.
You know? So that's the problem, is that, you know, medical can, the gray area of medical is very profitable. We have a social movement that has a $30 billion industry attached to it. You don't get that with breast cancer.
Yeah, right, right.
You know? you know, there's a lot of people in this movement who are activists, but they're not really activists, they're capitalists.
They're capitalists.
Yeah, they're serious capitalists. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here soon.
Good meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Actually, we
guys.
pulled it off. Yeah, that was pretty good. So listen, I'm dead serious though. If you guys are as pumped as it is and we're in the neighborhood, let's stick together, let's know each other and do things up here.
Okay.
And
I'll come
let's
there.
talk about the summer
Yeah,
and what we
absolutely.
can do down there.
Right next to each other.
Huh? We're right next to each other, absolutely, yeah.
Where do you hang out at Montclair?
Well, in Montclair, I don't do much. I have a daughter and I'm at my house, but come over and do a dab.
Where's the best bud in Montclair?
I have no idea. I get the best bed in New York.
Diesel, New York City Diesel.
I haven't bought bud in
I
Montclair.
had some shitty dealers.
Yeah? I'll know them.
In
I,
advance.
it's better to know a shitty dealer and not need one than need a shitty dealer and not know one.
So years ago, did you know a guy named Paul that was attached to
Paulie?
Normal?
No, I'm sorry, what?
Paul? Paul that was with Normal. And he's in Atlanta.
Paul Armentano.
Huh?
Paul Armentano.
He was in Atlanta?
Sure.
He was in Atlanta.
Well, he's
all over
he's
the place.
Paul Armentano is one of the three major national normal guys.
So this was like in the 70s or 80s.
Oh no, Paul was
maybe
big.
80s.
No,
was
no,
80s.
no.
I thought he was the president of Normal.
Keith was the head of Keith. The head of Normal back then was Keith Stroud.
Yeah. Maybe he was just the Georgia chapter. or
Might have been
something.
Georgia chapter.
He used to sell me hash. It was.
Georgia was the parents movement started in Georgia that took Normal down.
The what?
The parents movement that started in Georgia, DeKalb, Georgia,
Yeah.
when it became a national movement under the Reagan administration, and it took Normal down. It was,
Oh, really?
Yeah, it took the marijuana movement down. Yeah, all the losses of the early '80s stemmed from the parents movement. That stemmed from a movement in Georgia that was very effective on a statewide level in Georgia. They closed down all the head shops in Georgia and stuff.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, well, that was this parents' movement that did, and then they tried to, when Reagan went in, they tried to apply it on a national scale.
Yeah.
They couldn't do it. But they
Yeah, they
managed
closed
to.
all the head
do
shops,
it.
man, yeah.
Yeah, Georgia's been, and also the same thing was you gotta remember with the parents' movement there, was started up because Jimmy Carter was the governor. And he was,
I love Jimmy Carter.
well, yeah, me too. But Jimmy Carter and Bourne was his medical guy, Dr. Bourne, and in Georgia. And he
Yeah.
was the guy, he was for decriminalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
So there was a governor in Georgia with a surgeon general who was for the decriminalization, and all the parents went, oh, look, it's all fun. And all the Republican parents who didn't like Jimmy Carter to begin with,
Yeah.
right, they turned around and said, oh, and that's where the parents' movement came from, and that migrated out.
No shit.
Yeah, it's all big.
Yeah, that was
Is,
travesty.
Everything is connected.
Is everybody here on the Facebook page?
I don't know anything about
You're
it.
not on the Facebook page? Okay, so do you have a Facebook?
I think I'm on, I'm pretty sure I am.
I'm pretty sure I saw you on.
Yeah, I'm on there.
You got the other one, the one that we weren't using, taken down, right?
I
Yeah,
believe so.
I'm looking forward to doing some dabs out in Colorado.
it's
I
on
haven't
the
done
Facebook
Yes,
dabs.
sir. So
Yeah.
look me up in Colorado. When you guys get out there, we have the
Absolutely.
cell
I'm
phone.
going to
Yeah.
post
Call me, I'm getting on
the cap
Thursday
whiz
night.
for the hemp
Go on
and the
Thursday
decrim
night.
for
Thursday
everybody.
night, I'll be there Friday.
And that way,
Running around.
you know, we get in touch
I'll
with
be at the Snoop
representatives.
Show Friday night. If
I'll
Snoop's
reach out,
Friday,
to you
there'll be
guys,
whatever
too,
we're doing
about
on Friday, but call me.
Yeah.
something down the
Remind me,
short.
you know,